what's going on, Los Angeles, Bruin Nation, LAFB fam? How we doing? Your dynamic duo, the Thriller and Madman, back together again for all of your UCLA basketball needs. And we got a really fun episode talking about this team over the first 5 games of this young baby 2025-2026 season. But before we all get into it, for our passion for the hardwood, my main man, the myth, the legend, the institution, the voice of UCLA sports, the great Will, the Thrill Decker. Brother, how we doing? Haven't seen you in a few days. How's life? How was the weekend? Give me some deets.
It's always too long since the last time we recorded, my man, and it feels great to be back on the show. A lot has happened. We're going to preview, what's going on with the basketball season. Talk about what's going on in the gridiron as well. Some big news going on there, but things have been good, man. I had a nice trip with some of my college friends last weekend, and happy to be just recharged, ready to get back into the action, man. So nothing but positive vibes to start this episode off.
Oh, love it. And there's just nothing like those college friends, Thriller? I mean, it's just a very special time in life indeed. It's that time in life where you're friends for just being the sake of friends, right? There's no ulterior motive. It's so pure. So thrilled that you had such a wonderful weekend. Well, Thriller, the fans have wanted it for a few years, and we give what they want. We give the people what they want. We love UCLA. We love our fans. We love this place. And this is the year, Thriller, that you and I are doing very heavy basketball coverage now moving forward in the 2025-2026 season. We're going to be doing game previews. We're going to be doing game recaps. We're going to be bringing, obviously, guests and experts and really delving deep into basketball in addition to football. We're going to be the Bo Jackson, the Deion Sanders, the Shohei Ohtani of UCLA sports here as we dial up the coverage for our beloved Bruins. And I think the conversation, Thriller, has to begin. We're 5 games in, and I think this is a nice body of work to kind of start breaking down and analyzing this team over the course of the 25-26 season. Interesting breakdown, right? They're 4-1, started preseason number 12, sitting at number 19 right now. 4 pretty comfortable wins, albeit they had their own storylines up and down. And then the marquee game against Arizona, which was sort of a nail-biter, kind of heartbreaker there at the end. Obviously, early storylines with Donovan Dent and his impact. Then, obviously, an interesting game with Arizona. And then the big storyline just last night, how Mick started, essentially 4 bench players, in the last game. Basically everyone other than Eric Daly Jr., was benched to start the game to really sort of re-emphasize toughness and his DNA, his culture of defense and whatnot. So, Thriller, I have a lot of thoughts, but I want to give you the floor to start things off. Just what's your assessment to this team starting the year 4-1? What were your expectations kind of going into the season, and how have they either been challenged or affirmed through this first handful of games?
I think it was a rocky start when you look at, the level of competition that was laid out there. I mean, to beat Eastern Washington by 6 points, and I think the line was like over 25 points, so they should have won that ball game in. You're kind of a little concerned, but, they rallied. They beat Pepperdine by 11. Still probably should have won that by more. Mick is still kind of pissed in the press conferences. And West Georgia, you kind of step up. I think this team got a loss on their resume that can only help them moving forward. And what I mean by that is they blew the game late. When Tyler Bilodeau hit that 3 with about 7:18 left, I think he pushed it to like a 7-8 point lead at that time frame. You're thinking, holy cow, they're going to beat, the Wildcats. And lo and behold, it didn't go their way down the stretch. But as we were talking about off air and over the weekend, Arizona, I mean, they're probably going to be the number 1 team rolling around next week. I mean, they just beat UConn tonight. Like, this is the level of teams. They beat Danny Hurley. They beat the defending champion Florida Gators, and they beat us. And we, hung in that ball game about as tight as you could possibly be. So for a 1 loss right now through 4 games to be or 5 games, excuse me, to be the team that is likely the number 1 team in the country. My panic meter is not there. I think Mick Cronin, what he did last night in terms of starting just 4 bench guys and, really giving us a taste of what we can see with Trent Perry out there. You and I kind of agreeing before the season started that Eric Daly is the most important player on this roster. 15 and 10 last night, casual. By the way, that dunk he had in the Arizona game, electrifying stuff to watch. So I love me some Eric Daly. But it was a response, man. You win by 31 points, largest margin of victory. I think even Ben Bolch touched on it. It's the smoothest the team has looked since, the UC Irvine, I think, preseason win. It was a loss that kind of course corrects a program, in my opinion. And I think Mick kind of being that tough guy that we know him to be. I mean, people forget he was kind of an understudy to Bob Huggins, who's like a legendary tough coach guy. I mean, I go back and you might remember Joe Alexander. He was a lottery pick. It didn't really work out at West Virginia. They had the treadmill of death there. Do you remember this video?
Yeah.
They would run on the treadmill. I think it was like 6 or 7 minutes at full speed, and they would have to, make sure they're standing on there. People would be falling off the treadmill. It's tough as nails to play for Bob Huggins. That's clearly what Mick Cronin is, old school to the death. I like the response. And 2 things that I really like about this team trending forward is Donovan Dent, that hamstring injury clearly slowed him down a little bit offensively. He played probably the worst offensive game he's going to play all year against Arizona. This is a returning, the number 1 guy in the transfer portal. He went 5 of 16 from the floor. I see him really elevating his game. And Daly missed a month of practice leading up to the season start. He missed the first game completely. So Daly's kind of just getting back into his groove of things too. We saw the best game from Bilodeau against Arizona, which I think is really encouraging given the talent level on that floor. So the panic meter right now is at a 1. I don't feel, just yet, that there could be some sense of, urgency and we got to figure this out now. If we lose to Oregon in a couple Saturdays, maybe that goes up a little bit. But right now, as it stands, Madman, I've liked what I've seen.
Yeah, no, Thriller, it's a really sort of some interesting points, great takes, as always. It's a fascinating team this year. They're different than a traditional Mick Cronin team for a couple of reasons. Number one is you would never equate defensive liability with a Mick Cronin team, particularly from his days at Cincinnati and his first half dozen years here at UCLA. So the fact that the team kind of started off the way they did against Eastern Washington, we talked about it at length, 50% shooting, 38 paint points. I mean, it was very alarming to see a Cronin team play like that. The other interesting piece here, Thriller, is the composition of the team. And they lack length on the perimeter in ways where they've always sort of had it in these Cronin years. When you think about Jaquez as a wing, when you think about Kobe Johnson last year, you and I talked about Jules Bernard. And so when you're looking at a Dent and a Sky Clark in your backcourt, and then you've got Daly, Bilodeau, Xavier Booker has been a find this year as your first 5. And then you got Trent Perry as sort of your microwave 6th man. And then, Jamerson, I've really liked what I've seen, and just in terms of kind of a spark plug defensively, that's a really nice 7 from a role clarity standpoint, right? Like last year, the big storyline was, why couldn't you just play Mara and Bilodeau together, right? It always had to be either or, and the best unit it was really the both of them together because Bilodeau's true position in college is a 4. He needs that rim protector there. And Booker has been absolutely phenomenal, both defending, shot blocking, rebounding, and he's been terrific offensively in that pick and pop, particularly early in that Arizona game. And so you've got some things that you never had before, both positive and negative, right? You don't have that start defensive mentality that you did in years past, and you may not have that perimeter length that you did in years past. However, you have a role clarity that you didn't have in years past either, particularly in that 4-5 and with that first guard off the bench. And you have a lead guard in Donovan Dent, a caliber of whom you really haven't had since Lonzo Ball at the lead guard perspective. So that's what makes it so interesting, right? You can see the glass as half full. You can see the glass as half empty, given the positives and the negatives. Now, I think to your point, the things that are maybe a little bit negative in terms of defensive mentality are coachable. You can teach that and you can sort of elevate it. And I think it's going to be interesting how Mick sort of deals with the lack of length. And I think it may actually force him to stay big in the 4-5 because he's got a lack of length in the backcourt. So it may keep him in a situation where you're going to have that best 5 on the court. So actually the lack of length in a weird way on the perimeter might be a blessing in disguise because he's going to keep that 4-5 matchup. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see moving forward. Thriller, I agree with you in terms of this Arizona game. Arizona, I mean, Koa Pete is a lottery pick. They got Bradley, they got all of Burres, they got all of these guys.
De Arroyo, I think his last day, he was killed us for 20.
They're unreal. They're unreal. I mean, in terms of talent, beat Florida to your point, beat UConn. This is a team that's a legit Final Four team, could very well be a favorite to win the national championship already. And the fact that you played them so tough with Donovan Dent going 5 for 16, he looked limited offensively. That hamstring was really significant.
Really there, and
he was there.
The fact that we were leading late without him, being at his best, I think that's such an encouraging sign for UCLA moving forward, dude. And just to kind of piggyback off your initial point, I think a lineup we should throw out there more, seeing what we saw from Jamerson last night, a couple rejections, mixing it up with the bigs against Sacramento State. I'd go Jamerson. I'd go Booker. Bilodeau's flexible enough where he can shoot the ball from the corner a little bit. Go huge. That's the best defensive lineup. Length always wins in the game of basketball in terms of defensive prowess. And, man, if you have 6'9" Tyler Bilodeau guarding wings out there with Daly, who's 6'8", 6'9" as well, maybe guarding twos, and you just let Donovan Dent go out there and cook like we know him to be because Daly was shooting close to 40% from 3 last year. And then you got Bilodeau, who's a knockdown shooter. So you have the shooting out there with the size. That, to me, may be a best 5 scenario. And, it was really cool to see Mick kind of mix it up because it now allows us to kind of have some more ingredients in the kitchen, if you will, when we're cooking out there for UCLA. What do you think about the 5 of maybe Jamerson with the extra height?
It's fascinating. I mean, I really love it. I think that it's one of those where I think against the right teams and the right matchups, that's a package, right? Like to your point, you go Jamerson at the 5, you go Booker at the 4, Bilodeau at the 3, Daly at the 2, Dent as your lead guard. Now you got that length defensively. It's almost like your defensive sort of, package that you go to if you need to sort of pack the paint and really slow down one of these sort of finesse, high-powered, up-and-down type of offenses. I love that so much because then there's sort of a counter to that, right? Where if you go super small, right, you go sort of Warriors death lineup almost, between like Dent, Clark, Perry, and then you used to go with potentially even, you bring Jamar Brown off the bench and then you go Bilodeau at the 5, right? You can go sort of super small with your shooters. You can go sort of super big in terms of the depth. So I like both of them very, very significantly. And I think if Mick is open to the expiration, that's always been the question with Mick, right? Where his rotation is super tight. He's very rigid about it. If he's willing to sort of be more open and exploratory, I think you have some very interesting combinations with this team, as you've had in years past, right, Thriller? I mean, we've been sort of aching for that variety for a few years now, and this team is no different in that regard in terms of what they have. Because I'll tell you, I think the top 6, top 7 of UCLA is as good as any top 6 or top 7 as there is in the country. I really believe that in terms of the top end talent and the role clarity. I think this top 6, top 7 can compete with anyone in the country. And we saw that against Arizona. Now the question is, can they stay healthy? Are they not going to wear down? Can you develop 8, 9, and 10 enough where you're going to give these guys enough breathers where they stay fresh come February and March?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think this whole thing could potentially work with just how fluid Xavier Booker has looked and the leap he's really taken in year 3. It's rare you get a guy from a Tom Izzo program that isn't developed and he goes to UCLA and he's making plays. I mean, the first play of the Arizona game on offense, he hits the big 3 to start it where it's like, okay, we're here. We're ready to play U of A. Booker's fluidity, whether he's shooting from long distance, whether he's protecting the paint, he's got it, man. And it's really cool to see the athlete, the level of caliber that he has with his basketball IQ catching up to it in real time. And I'm really excited about the potential of that. So with Booker's fluidity, I think that lineup works. And, if the scoring is a problem, you got two heat check guys right off the bench in Trent Perry and Sky Clark. So I think it's something that needs to be explored. But I also want to explore this. We've talked about the first 5 games of the season. Let's talk about the next 5 games. What do you think we can do? We got a big game against Gonzaga, Saturday, December 13th, the number 13 team in the country. We were at the game last year, and we had a ball at a 2-0.
Oh, no doubt.
Right behind our boy Norm Powell. We made his Instagram story, which was insane. We had a lot of fun at that game. UCLA pulled that out, but we got Presbyterian on Friday night. You and I will be at that game from what it sounds like. And then we got, Cal. We got Cal Bears, the ACC Cal Bears playing UCLA. We're going up to Oakland and Berkeley for that. Washington, Oregon, and Gonzaga. So Presbyterian, Cal, Washington, Oregon, Gonzaga. What do you think our records through 5 games there?
Thriller, I think there's a real world there where, none of those teams are as good as Arizona, Gonzaga included. And so on paper there, you think, 5-0 is very much in the cards. I think there's the reality is it probably might be 4-1 in those 5, where either Oregon or Gonzaga, they might drop just as they continue to sort of discover who they are defensively and from a rotation standpoint. So I would think, 4-1 at minimum. And I think there's a world where they can win all 5 if that message has been received, to our earlier point, after, the benching has taken place and that mentality is increased. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. I want to counter something with you, because for all of the positives about this Arizona game and losing by 4 to potentially the number 1 team in the country, so you feel really, really close, you felt a little empty at the end of that game because of how the game was lost and how similar that game was lost to games in the past in the Cronin era, right? When we think about tournament games against Gonzaga, when we think about a tournament game against North Carolina, when we think about a couple of SC games, over the years, when we think about a couple of regular season games to Arizona and Oregon over the years, the script of UCLA taking a lead in the first half, the script of UCLA having a big lead even midway through the second half and not being able to hang on and close the game, was something that just felt all too familiar. And Thriller, for as excited as we were, that final 7.5 minutes of the game, to only end the final 7.5 minutes with 8 points and essentially sort of lose that 8-point lead. The ball was moving up until that 8-minute mark. Dent, Clark moving the ball around. Bilodeau hits a couple threes. Daly hits a couple threes. And then that last 7.5 minutes, Thriller, the ball stuck. Everything was one-on-one ISO. There was very little movement. There was very little motion. There was no pick and roll. It sort of became, again, kind of classic Cronin, where he said, look, I'm just going to put the ball in my best ball handler's hands and just sort of go one-on-one, and we'll see what happens. He did that with Jaquez over the years, has done that with others in the past, and we saw that same script again. So as excited as we are about being so close, the fact that they lost the game in such a similar fashion as to the last few years continues to sort of bring up this question that in these big games against these teams with 5-star rosters, where effort alone and defense alone can't get the win for you, is Cronin going to evolve enough offensively to be able to get this team over the top in some of these big games? And I found it also interesting that Cronin's response after the Arizona game was to harp on the fact that I'm benching these 4 guys because they're not playing enough defense. And the reality is we held, maybe the most explosive team in the country to under 70 points. And it really was 8 points in the last 7.5 minutes offensively that cost us the game. And the focus was on the defense. Your thoughts there? Because it feels, I'm finding myself feeling very mixed about the Arizona game.
Yeah. The UCLA, it's almost like we get too tight in these big moments, and it shows. I'm going to take a point that Kurt Signetti made a couple weeks ago when the reporter asked him at Penn State, Indiana's lost here, they haven't won a game here ever. And he goes, well, my team's never played here.
Right.
This team has never played here. And it was a bad loss to probably the number one team in the country. The offense was stagnant. But when you have a player the caliber of Donovan Dent, hampered, nothing's going in for him, hamstring. I mean, this guy, there's an argument for this guy not being just the best point guard, but the best passer in the country in terms of facilitating to get his teammates open. He just didn't have it. So, like, if this is a trend moving forward with Dent, I think we've got to start talking about that. But given the injury, given it was just kind of a one-night affair, let's see how he plays against Gonzaga, in a couple weeks. I think it's unfortunately been a trend with some of these MIC teams, but man, I mean, some of those Gonzaga games, just the shots they would pull out there. I mean, the Jalen Suggs thing is a legendary shot. You know what I mean? Like, that is one where they did everything right, and it just Suggs just banks in a half quarter. There's nothing you could do. And God, who's the big man that drove me crazy at Gonzaga? God, what was his name? White dude. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh, Timmy.
Yeah, Drew Timmy, just making these like Kareem hook shots. Like, it was, I mean, it was unbelievable. And, ironically, it's Tommy Lloyd on the other side, who's a longtime assistant for Mark Few, doing all this stuff. We've been waiting on the Tommy Lloyd thing to kind of blow up at Arizona. It's finally hitting for Tommy Lloyd. It's finally hitting for him in Arizona. But long story short, I think I'm going to evaluate this team specifically as we get more data. I'm not worried about it because I think that Arizona team is badass, right? You don't beat Danny Hurley and the defending Florida Gators without being badass. So, like, I got to give them their due. We'll see in Gonzaga in a couple weeks.
No, I think that's a really fair point, Thriller. And, man, how fun is it to be talking about basketball,
Yes.
And
you and I are basketball guys first. I don't think
we're basketball guys first, and UCLA is basketball guys first, And so to be at the ultimate blue blood in the history of college football and to be talking about this, Thriller, this is going to be so fun for us, game over game and week over week. And our fans, we got you covered all through March, and we're going to get into the recruiting as well. Thriller and I are going both feet in the pool here with basketball. You guys have asked for it the last couple of years. We've explored it. So this is episode 1 of many to come. So stay tuned. Really hit that like and subscribe button. As you know, we're trying to grow this community for our beloved Bruins. So it would mean the world to us to hit that like and subscribe button as we continue to create more content for our beloved Bruins. And so before we get out of here, got to pay the bills. You see the Sleeper app, #1 sports app in the country today. You got live stats, engagement feed, real-time feeds, conversations. You can do over and unders. You can have all kinds of conversations on your favorite players and teams. Look at that. Thriller's got it up there. And you get the $100 match bonus. You start with 100. You get 100 for free. The 100 becomes 200. And so tell them the guys at LAFB Network sent you. Hit that promo code UCLA LAFB and get that $200 match. And we got you covered. And folks, like we always say, Thriller and me are going to be back here in just a bit, talking all things football, and what a season it's going to be. We got it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think we got some big hopes here for this team, 25-26. The journey is just beginning, and let's hope that learning experience from Arizona carries over, and we bring home banner number 12 in 26. Heck yeah. Be loud, be proud, be passionate, Bruins. And like we always say, 4's up forever, baby. 4's up forever.